Today's episode of Cornbread and Crap Boxes, we're going to see if we can get this carburetor rebuilt on this thing. See if we can get copper back into good health, get him running again. He hasn't been running too well. I think the reason why the old spark plugs were fouled is because the carburetor is running too rich. I mean, a person might as well go ahead and rebuild the carburetor. Carb rebuild kit's cheap. Comes with instructions, and I only did it one time before, but I got it right. As long as you follow the instructions the way they're supposed to be followed, it ain't too bad. And hopefully we can get copper back in tip-top shape. I'm not a master mechanic by any means. I don't know everything under the sun. Go figure. But maybe you might want to stick around, watch this episode. Who knows? Me and you might figure out something together that never figured out before. I'll learn a little something, you learn a little something. Ain't that how it works? They're probably saying, I can't learn nothing from you. I mean, look at you. You look like a hobo. That may be true, but that doesn't mean I ain't got a brain. Welcome to the channel. If you haven't yet, like this video and share it and hit that subscribe button down there so that way y'all can get some more of this cornbread content I'm pushing out. I've done told you everything you need to know about it. I mean, I done told you it was good. Why should I have to tell you anymore? Here's where we're probably going to start at. Probably go ahead and get some of these lines loose, these vacuum lines. Get this fuel line off, get this fuel filter off. I'm pretty sure it's just a couple of linkages, maybe a return spring, and two nuts that holds the carburetor onto the intake. Unplug the electric choke, get all that off. Once we get the carburetor off, well, I guess we'll be ready to rebuild it. Sometimes these carburetors, when they've been sitting for a certain period of time, well, these gaskets has been dry for a while. So when you start sending gas back through them, what'll happen is a lot of that gas that was sitting in the tank turns into varnish and eats up these gaskets. So that's really what causes them to go bad. That sitting and staying dry and then being rejuvenated with a bunch of that old gas, which technically it's my fault. You could get lucky and the carburetor run just fine, have accelerator pump and everything. There's the other 75% of the time where you have no accelerator pump, it's completely gone, or it's froze up, or you're floating there, kind of gets hung, and gas just comes out of the vent tube. Just so you know, I did not get the right wrenches off camera. I got them right the first time. By the way, thank y'all for watching, because now I got over 100 subscribers. Yay! But just to let y'all know, I'm very thankful to be at home, to be doing this. First and foremost, I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Hey, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to do it. And number two, I wouldn't be able to do it without y'all. I thank him first, and I thank y'all second. I do appreciate y'all watching. I appreciate every one of you that shared my videos and maybe showed somebody my content. What in the world? Two different sizes. I believe I might have already worked on this thing. What am I doing? Probably doing this the hard way. I could just get a swivel socket with electric impact and just have it off. I guess I like doing things the hard way. that far down on there. My Lord. Could they pick a nut with less threads? Or a stud shorter? It's like all the torque was on this side and none was on the other. Finally. Oh, daggum. Oh, there we go. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's leaking down here. Look at all that old milky stuff coming out of there. Whew. Lord, it looks like water too. This thing definitely needed a rebuild. Made in USA. It's got a bunch of different numbers on there. MFD by Carter for Motorcraft. What in the world? Just go on with it. Quit driving slow and they won't bark at you. People see dogs barking and they wonder why they bark. Bent that wire to that electric choke a little bit. I would rather have a mechanical choke every day, any day of the week. So that way I know for sure the choke's working. We're not flooding out, or we're not cranking for 3-4 minutes trying to get this thing started. Now that we got it off, I'm gonna quit yapping. I'm gonna see if I can't go buy a carb rebuild kit for this thing. All right, so I'm back. It's probably about 6:30. Had some errands to run. I went by and got in the zone at AutoZone and picked me up a carburetor rebuild kit. Hopefully it's the right one. I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing tore apart. I'll get back with y'all in a minute. So I got everything taken apart, and so far I think I've got the right kit.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna show you what I got and go on from there. Yeah. So float, it seems to be working right. I did check little needle valve right here, and it is moving, so it's not stuck, but I didn't have a problem with it overflowing with gas and coming out the vent tube, so I knew there was nothing wrong with this. Now, inside of here, there's some trash and sediment, but I want you to look at how black the inside of that throat of the carburetor looks. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing rebuilt, try to focus on it, and when I get done with it, I'll come back to y'all. All right, this is day 2 of the carburetor rebuild. Probably took me till about 12 o'clock because I would get one thing finished and realized I forgot this part, and then I would go back and do it again, and then put on another part, do the exact same thing over and over again until I finally got it. But it's rebuilt, and hopefully it runs. Hopefully. I'm gonna leave the choke the exact same way it was. The idle air adjustment screw, which this 1-barrel carburetor only has one. The float adjustment was a little bit off, so I adjusted it. When I opened it, I couldn't see it last night outside. It looked like it was fairly clean, but there was a lot of sand and grit and almost like this fine powdery substance. My guess is it was the old gas that had dried up and turned into dusty varnish-like stuff. And then once we substituted in the new gas and started filling it back up, it basically turned into cement that just stayed wet all the time and never hardened up. I think this truck had carburetor issues because when I put the new spark plugs in it, it ran good probably for about the first 6 cranks. And then after that, it started showing the same problems that it was whenever I first got it. I'm leaving all the adjustments on the carburetor the exact same, the way I found them. And we're gonna see with me just rebuilding this thing and popping it on here and hooking everything back up, if it'll fire up and run better than what it did before the carburetor got rebuilt. I could have took the carburetor exactly how it was and just stuck it in some chem dip, but honestly, with this thing sitting as long as it has, and it looked like it had some work done to it before and somebody had been in it, but whoever had been in it didn't set things right, and the gaskets were already brittle and tearing apart. So it was just good for me to go ahead and just rebuild it the best way I know how, which is with no knowledge. Maybe I did it right. I don't know. We're gonna get ready and see. So another thing I picked up is one of these mechanical chokes. It's really simple and easy. Basically, you just take the electric choke that was in there out, put this one in. It comes with a bunch of different hardware and brackets, so that way you can put it on, and then all you have to do is just find you a hole. Stupid bugs. Find you a hole to run it through in the firewall, and just mount it right underneath your dash somewhere. If you're lucky, maybe you can find you a bolt that's holding the dash up, and you can just mount it there to make it easy on you. That way, you don't have to worry about the electric choke one day, just deciding, hey, I want to go out. And then next thing you know, you're going down the road in your truck, and your truck's like, and it just quits on you because the choke plate just closed. This solves that, because all you have to do is just pull out a cable and push one in. Problem solved. That's the beautiful thing about mechanical stuff. It takes a little bit of extra initiative, but in the long run, it lasts a whole lot longer and does a whole lot better. And these electrical chokes, they work good if they're working, but if not, they ain't. It's just that simple. The proper way to scrape these gaskets clean right here is to get yourself a scraper and maybe some brake clean, a little bit of sandpaper, and just make sure that you get this whole area clean. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a screwdriver with the detachable bits, and I'm gonna find me the biggest flathead that I got, and I'm just gonna go digging on her and just make sure I get all that paper right down in there in the intake. Of course you don't want to do that, but hey, a little bit ain't gonna hurt it. Fire burns paper, so it'd be all right. People just worry about too much. I get it, but sometimes they'll just make a mountain out of a molehill. Try that in small town. See how far you make it down the road. Do 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 do. I feel sorry for poor old Jason Aldean releasing that song and getting a bunch of hate from it. I honestly think it's a love song. What? Cornbread? A love song? Yeah, you heard me right. I said a love song. Well, how could you figure that? Well, think about it. It's about small town people getting together, standing up for one another for something that they believe in. And that if somebody comes around and tries to tear that down, that they'll band together because they love one another and stand up for each other. That's the reason why I think it's a love song. It's working pretty good. Not as good as I hoped. Just takes a little bit of that elbow grease. Yeah, here, you devil. All right, so I got the surface fairly clean. Screwdriver works pretty good for that. You can turn that corner and scrape it off, and then take the flat part, just scrape it real good. No, it's not perfect, but one, it's good enough to seal it, and two, it's good enough for me. So that's all that matters. I think the next step we're going to take, I'm going to slap this carburetor on here, get all these vacuum lines and linkages and everything else hooked up, and see if we can get this thing to crank and run better than what it was previously. Carburetor. I worked on this thing till 12 o'clock last night. One thing that took me so long was I didn't have any brake cleaned. Well, cornbread, how in the world did you get it clean? A lot of times you can use what you got lying around. WD-40 will work. I know it's a penetrant, but if there's a lot of dirt, stuff like that in there, it'll work on getting some of that dirt and crud out of those small crevices and holes inside this carburetor. I didn't have WD-40, I had PB Blaster. And honestly, PB Blaster, if it's good enough to break up rust and to get bolts unstuck, it's good enough to clean this thing out. I don't know if it was good for the gaskets, but obviously I replaced the gaskets that was in here. So it doesn't make a difference whether the PB Blaster tore up the gaskets or not. It just worked in order to clean this thing out. Now I also went a second step. I took this inside the house, and shoo-wee, boy did my house smell like old gas. Gosh, it stunk. My wife about killed me for that. I basically just took this thing apart, laid it out on the table with a towel, set the main parts inside the sink with some Dawn dishwashing liquid, and just let them soak for a little while. And then I took the little tiny parts that was in here and set them in a bowl separate with some Dawn dishwashing liquid as well. After I let it sit for a little while, I went over, drained the water, and took a toothbrush and started scrubbing it. Now, obviously, it didn't get it 100% clean, but man, it's like day and night from what it once was. If it works, is it stupid? No, it's not. Now, this kit I bought came with a gasket, and I finally figured out what this big piece is right here. I don't know why I didn't think it was that before. It is the EGR exhaust gas regulator. It's basically trying to take down on some of the emissions. I mean, who cares about that? All I care about is, does it run, is it loud, and is it fast? And come on, all us car guys are like that. I did ask a good friend that I used to work with if I could delete this, and I can. I don't want to plate this off and block this off. It's just too darn ugly. So what I want to do is I want to delete it. I'll have to get a plug for the manifold. I'll have to get a spacer right here about the same thickness as this. Get rid of a bunch of these vacuum lines and cap them off. And it's not that hard to do, just looking at it. The biggest reason why I want the spacer is because of my kick down bracket, or it's for the overdrive, either one, I don't know. And the throttle cable, make sure that everything's aligned for it. Now I looked up on Amazon, I'm pretty sure I can buy a spacer. This looks to be about maybe 2 inches thick. So if I could get like a 1 inch thick or a 2 inch thick spacer to run right there, and then put my carburetor on top of it, I think it'll be fine. Well, it's about time I quit yapping my mouth and get to work. Where in the world's all these bees coming from? You know what? I ain't doing that again. Do it the smart way. Get off there, you devil. Well, no wonder I use them wrenches. Maybe I can get the ratchet one to do it on this side. It's too thick. Yep, too thick. Nothing ever works. We're also tightening down this big ugly hunk of metal that Ford thought necessary to put on this truck. So if it feels like you're rounding out the stud or the nut, you're not. You're just having to travel a half a mile down this stud to make sure that everything's tight. I went to O'Reilly's to find this filter. Said I'd have to order it. Went to Advance Auto Parts. Had one, but for some odd reason, they said they had one, but said it wasn't off the truck yet. They didn't have one. I didn't even try to get in the zone again. We're just gonna revamp and rejuvenate the filter that we got. Just as so. Brake clean would work better. Like I said, this is what I got. Well, cornbread, what happens if you get a bunch of trash out of this filter inside your carburetor? Didn't you say that was bad? Yes, it is bad. It's what I got for right now. It's what I'm going to use. And it's already rebuilt. So if I have to take it apart and clean it again, that's all I'm going to have to do. I ain't going to have to worry about the rest. Unless I break a gasket. Then I'm up that one dirty name creek that I ain't going to say without a paddle. And I definitely don't want to be swimming around in a bunch of doo-doo. So Now, where did the other one go? Hello, are you it? Is this you? Is it you again, Margaret? You don't know me, Margaret, but I know you. Wampa, 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 wampa. No, that's on these newer ones. Let me get it right. Run, pa 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 pa. Run, pa 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 pa. Ring, 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 ring. Pa 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 pa. Yeah, that sounds more accurate. Here we go. Number 2. Ruh-roh, Raggy. I don't know if that's a good sign. Uh-oh. I do have a little bit of leak right here. Yeah, a lot of leak. So I need to tighten that up more. Oh, well. Sure, that'll work. Well, she's got some carbon built up. Last time when this thing was running rough, I changed the spark plugs and it started running better. Go get a set of Ford Motorcraft Platinum plugs. It helps these old trucks, cars, it's got carburetors, burn off a little bit of that extra fuel. And they're hot, but they're not too hot, so they work perfect for these things. If you can't go with Motorcraft, go with something different than Autolite. Obviously, Autolite's cheap and they're decent, but I hadn't had these things in here 2 weeks and they're already starting to do the same thing that the other one was. Now, it's probably not their fault, but at the same time, you would think that a brand new plug would hold up better than ones that's probably sitting in the truck for at least 10 years. So, because it's still sending plenty of fuel up here. I ain't got no fuel coming out the vent tube, which is great. I do have an accelerator pump, which is good. Done checked that. Better than my last one. So I'm gonna get in here and fire on this thing again and see if I can get it to run. So I'm beginning to wonder if I have spark. If we're not getting spark, then I know we have a problem with the point system inside our distributor. No spark. Okay guys, so here's the deal. Basically, there's an ignition control module right here. And then here's your coil that sits right here, because it doesn't look like a standard, normal car coil. And apparently I wasn't looking with my eyeballs when I seen that. The ignition control module, it does ignition control module things. As soon as you turn on the key, it sends electronic signal to turn everything on inside underneath the cap. Okay, you still do have a button, but you basically have this round thing with 2 bolts that sits on top of your coil, and as it turns and goes around, it opens and closes an electronic signal in there, so that way this coil knows when to throw spark to the spark plugs. And I'm pretty sure the computer underneath the dash goes along with all this crap right here and all these vacuum lines and stuff like that, and that's how it advances everything. Because you can see it doesn't have a vacuum advance on it. So this is just a mashup of new technology on an old school system, and it works when it works, but when it doesn't, it doesn't. Now, it was blowing out raw fuel, but it was running. It would idle weird and funny, and it was like it wasn't missing, but it was like it was running rich or something was off about it. I moved it from beside the double wide to here, and that's when it shut off and it would never start again. Rebuilt the carburetor. Carburetor's working good now. Pulled off, number one spark plug, laid it on a piece of metal, hit the switch, and no spark. So the only thing that I can think of is it has to be that ICM or it has to be this coil. Because I honestly haven't seen any videos about the computer underneath the dash going bad. And this is just going to motivate me more one day to switch this thing from this terrible system that Ford apparently has to the HEI version that you can buy probably off Amazon or eBay or wherever you can buy it at. Trust me, I'm going to get one. Honestly believe if I do that, it'll throw more power to the system. The coil will be sitting on top, everything will be there. I'll have the vacuum advance. I can get rid of this big ugly coil and this plate right here. I can get rid of the ICM, and I could probably get rid of that box underneath the dash. I'll just have to run me a hot wire from the switch out here and then run a ground, and it'll be hooked up. Everything will run. I'll probably have to get everything set back up at top dead center, which I'll probably do the redneck way. Just feel when air is coming out of this piston. Make sure it's all the way at the top, and put the button on the number one cylinder at the distributor. Once I do that, I really won't have to worry about a no spark issue. Welcome back to Will This F-150 Run? And it will, but put you a set of spark plugs in it first. And then after 6 cranks, then she goes out again. And then you rebuild the carburetor thinking it's a fuel issue. And then once you get it rebuilt and put it back on here, you find out it's not a fuel issue, even though it was running rich out the tailpipes and blowing out raw gas. Come to find out, it's a spark issue. So let's get into the happy world of electronics. I replaced the ICM. This one doesn't look old, so I believe I'm going to keep it. This bolt was loose on the coil, and this one wasn't. So when I put the new one on, I make sure I tightened both of them up. I cranked on it, still no spark. So I guess the first place I should have looked at, instead of going to a forum, was probably this nasty old coil that's been sitting on there for years. But anyway, I ain't worried about it. Just means I'm over budget a little bit, which is all right. Like I said, when you get one from sitting and try to make it run again, when you start driving it, some things will come around, and then some things just won't. And a lot of times you'll find out why it was parked in the first place. But hey, it's okay. Got a brand new ICM, brand new coil. Okay, fingers crossed. Here we go. Lord, please let this thing fire. Hey! It jumped. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to set my idle screw, just run it out a little bit, and then I'm going to try to fire on this thing and see if it'll run. All right, it's adjusted out a little bit. Let's see what it'll do. Hey. Let's adjust it a little bit more. Hey, it's idling. Oh, there you go. Okay. A little bit more. Oh, come on, you devil. Don't be doing that. Oh, come on. What's going on now? Hey, Zayden, get in there and turn the switch for me. This thing just keeps on racking my brain. I don't have a test light to test any of this stuff. Ooh. Well, this is about the time that I would say, hey, we just ain't gonna get it. But I decided to try one more thing. It was a whole lot harder for me to change the pickup and the distributor than just to go buy a whole new distributor. I just didn't want to spend that kind of money. So I went and picked up a pickup, took the distributor out, beat, banged, and beat and banged getting that gear off. Got the pickup in there, had to fight getting that little hole aligned for that gear. Put it all back together. Done the backwoods way of figuring out timing because I didn't want to look at this little hole over here. So I stuck my finger in the #1 spark plug hole. I turned my wrench around until the piston was all the way at the top where I couldn't feel no more air coming out of the hole. Aligned it with the #1 spark plug. It probably don't look pretty. I probably got wires going everywhere. That's okay. Just as long as it works, that's all that matters. Hooked all the spark plugs back up, went in there and fired. It fired, but it was running a little rough. Adjusted on the timing a little bit. I was like, well, let's fiddle around with this idle air adjustment screw and see what we can do with it. I started going in with it, and apparently I was right there on the edge of it shutting off. So I backed it out. The idle started to clear up. And then I went back over here to my idle adjustment screw and turned it down. And I want to show y'all what I got now. Lord, I hope it cranks this time. I don't want to have to go through this whole mess again of it running and trying to show y'all. And he's running pretty good. That's pretty good in my book. Let's put her in gear and see how she does there. Well, fellas, there you have it. Rebuilt carburetor on a 300 inline 6-cylinder. Probably spent a lot of money that I shouldn't have. Come to find out. But the thing about these old rigs is half the parts that on them do work, but they're old and crusty and rusty and wore out. Probably need to be replaced. So why not go ahead and replace them anyway? This is just to show you guys, even with me, with just a very tiny bit of knowledge, can do this. So that means you guys at home can do the same thing if you just put your mind to it. I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure y'all like, comment, subscribe. I'll take any comment there is out there, negative or positive. It gives me feedback from y'all, and it really helps. I know I don't do everything right. I've done said that probably 1,000,000 times in this video. But it runs, and it runs pretty darn good, if I do have to say so myself. Not tooting on my own horn, but I do appreciate y'all fellers tuning in and watching. And as always, we'll see y'all fellers later.